Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, I'm going to talk about something that surprises a lot of English learners, and that's how using the word please too much can actually make you sound less polite, not more polite. I know that sounds backwards because you were probably taught that please is the magic word for being polite. But in American English, there are often better ways to make requests that sound more natural and more respectful. Instead of saying, please send me the report, native speakers are more likely to say, could you send me the report? Or would you mind sending me the report? By the end of this lesson, you're going to understand why this happens, when please works well, and when you should use other phrases instead. This is all about cultural nuance and sounding natural in American workplace and social settings. Let's get started. So what's the issue with please? The word itself isn't bad, but the way it's often used can come across as commanding or bossy, especially in American English. Here's why. When you start a sentence with please followed by a command like, please close the door, or please send me that file, it sounds very direct. You're telling someone what to do, even though you added please to soften it. In many cultures, adding please to a command is considered polite enough. But in American culture, especially in professional settings, people prefer requests that sound more collaborative and less like orders. Instead of telling someone what to do, you're asking them if they can do it, which gives them a sense of choice and respect. Let me give you an example. If you say to a coworker, please finish this by tomorrow, it can sound like you're their boss giving them an order. But if you say, could you finish this by tomorrow? Or, would you be able to finish this by tomorrow? It sounds like you're making a request and you're acknowledging that they have the power to say yes or no. The tone is completely different, even though you're asking for the same thing. This doesn't mean please is wrong or rude. It just means that in American English, questions tend to sound more polite than commands, even when you add please to the command. The cultural preference is for indirect requests rather than direct ones. So what should you use instead of please? There are several question formats that sound more polite and natural in American English. The most common ones are can you, could you, would you, and would you mind. Let's start with can you and could you. These are probably the most common ways to make a request. For example, instead of saying, please open the window, you'd say, can you open the window? Or, could you open the window? Both work, but could you sounds just a tiny bit more formal or polite than can you. In everyday conversation, people use both interchangeably. Next, we have would you and would you mind. Would you is similar to could you, just slightly more formal. For example, would you send me that file? Sounds polite and professional. Would you mind is even softer and more indirect. When you say, would you mind closing the door? You're asking if it would bother them to do it, which is about as polite as you can get. Just remember that with would you mind, the answer flips. If someone says no, I don't mind, it means they're happy to do it, not that they're refusing. Another useful phrase is, I was wondering if you could. This is super polite and sounds very natural in professional settings. For example, I was wondering if you could help me with this project. It's indirect, it's respectful, and it shows that you're thinking about their time and availability. You can also use, do you think you could, or is there any way you could? These add an extra layer of politeness by acknowledging that you're asking for a favor. For example, do you think you could look over this document? Or, is there any way you could finish this by Friday? Now, I want to be clear that please isn't always bad. There are definitely situations where it works well and sounds perfectly natural. The key is knowing when to use it. First, please works great when you combine it with a question. Instead of, please help me, you can say, could you please help me? Or, would you please send me the file? Here, you're using a polite question structure and adding please for extra politeness. This sounds respectful and natural. Second, please is fine in service situations. or when you're making a simple, casual request. For example, if you're at a restaurant, saying please pass the salt, or could I please have some water, is totally normal. In these contexts, please doesn't sound bossy because the situation is casual and the request is small. Third, please works when you're being urgent, but still trying to be polite. If something is time sensitive, you might say, please respond as soon as possible, or please let me know by tomorrow. In these cases, the directness is expected because of the urgency, and please shows you're still trying to be respectful. Fourth, please is common in written communication like emails, especially when paired with a question. Could you please review this document? Or, would you please confirm your attendance? These sound professional and polite in writing. So please isn't the enemy. It's just about using it in the right context, and when possible, pairing it with a question rather than a command. Let's talk about why this cultural nuance exists in American English. In American culture, there's a strong emphasis on equality and collaboration, especially in the workplace. Even if you're someone's manager, the cultural norm is to make requests in a way that respects the other person's autonomy. You're not supposed to sound like you're ordering people around, even if you technically have the authority to do so. This is different from some other cultures where hierarchy is more explicit and direct commands are considered normal and respectful, especially from someone in a higher position. But in the US, even bosses tend to phrase things as questions. A manager might say, "Could you get that report to me by Friday?" instead of, "Give me that report by Friday." It's a way of showing respect and maintaining good working relationships. Another reason for this is that Americans tend to value indirectness in polite speech. Being too direct can come across as rude or aggressive, so people soften their requests by framing them as questions. This creates a sense of politeness and consideration. Of course, this doesn't mean Americans never use direct language. In urgent situations or when giving clear instructions, direct commands are totally acceptable. But in everyday interactions, especially when making requests, the preference is for polite questions rather than commands. Understanding this cultural nuance is really important if you're working in an American company or communicating with American colleagues. It's not just about the words you use, it's about the tone and the relationship dynamics you're creating. Let's look at some real-life examples so you can see how this works in practice. Imagine you're in an office and you need your coworker to review a document. If you say, "Please review this document," it sounds like you're telling them what to do. But if you say, "Could you review this document when you get a chance?" it sounds like you're asking for their help and respecting their time. The second option is going to be received much better. Here's another scenario. You're in a meeting and you want someone to share their screen. Instead of saying, "Please share your screen," try, "Would you mind sharing your screen?" or "Can you share your screen?" It sounds more collaborative and less commanding. Or let's say you need someone to send you a file. Instead of, "Please send me the file," you could say, "Could you send me that file?" Or, "Would you be able to send me the file by this afternoon?" It's softer, it's more polite, and it sounds more natural. What about in writing? If you're sending an email and you need a response, instead of writing, "Please reply by tomorrow," you might write, "Could you please reply by tomorrow?" Or, "I'd appreciate it if you could get back to me by tomorrow." These sound more respectful and less demanding. Even in casual situations, this applies. If you're at a friend's house and you want them to turn down the music, saying, "Please turn down the music" sounds a bit bossy. But saying, "Could you turn down the music a little?" Or, "Would you mind turning down the music?" sounds much friendlier. Let's talk about some mistakes learners make with this. The first mistake is overusing "please" with every request. If you say, "Please do this," "Please do that," "Please help me," "Please send this," it starts to sound robotic and overly formal. Mix it up with question structures instead. The second mistake is using "please" with a harsh tone. If you say, "Please send me that file" in a sharp or impatient tone, the "please" doesn't make it polite. Tone matters just as much as the words you use. The third mistake is thinking that please is always the most polite option. As we've talked about, question structures like could you or would you mind are often more polite than please, plus a command, especially in professional settings. The fourth mistake is being too indirect to the point where your request gets lost. You still need to be clear about what you're asking for. Saying, I was just thinking maybe if it's not too much trouble, possibly you could perhaps look at this, is way too much. Keep it polite but clear. Quick recap. Using please too much, especially with commands, can sound bossy in American English. Instead, use polite question structures like, could you, would you, can you, or would you mind? These sound more collaborative and respectful. Please still works well when combined with questions or in casual, service-oriented situations. Understanding this cultural nuance helps you sound more natural and more polite in American workplace and social settings. You did great today. This is one of those cultural nuances that textbooks don't always teach, but it makes a huge difference in how you're perceived in English-speaking environments. If this lesson helped you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more lessons on real, natural English. Leave a comment and tell me if you've noticed this difference in how Americans make requests. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, being polite isn't just about using the word please. It's about understanding cultural expectations and choosing the phrasing that shows respect and collaboration. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep sounding more natural every day. I'll see you in the next lesson. Take care.